Hey, Steve Stine here. If you've been playing guitar for a while but feel like you've hit a wall, I totally get it. Now in this series, I'm going to show you exactly what we do inside the Academy. The real practical ways we help players break through the frustration and start making real progress. Bass in the background.
Well, we got no choice. All the girls and boys making all that noise.
Okay, in my opinion, one of the most underrated bands ever. So unique, so weird, and so musical. So you listen to the bass playing on this thing. You listen to the beginning of this. Because we're all drawn into that guitar because it's a great riff. If we think about this, like what made that band unique, so when Alice went out on his own and, you know, Bob Ezrin joined him, and Bob Ezrin was like the big thing that catapulted him to the next level. And even that music, like the writing of Alice at the time was very synonymous with like Elton John, right? With the way that they would write, and they'd have kind of a string element to the things that they would do. There'd be a lot of those kind of things. But these early days, it was kind of cool because it didn't all make sense. When you play Schools Out, it's not as smooth as Crazy Train would be. But you listen, let me show you this. Listen to Dennis Dunaway, the bass player. Listen to him here. Two different chords happening. Two chords, different chords happening. And then... Now he comes into the groove.
Well, we got no choice. All the girls and boys making all...
So he's got this thing happening. So that's what's so cool about them is this is completely the opposite of something that Sabbath would do. Where Sabbath, everybody's on the same thing, right? Right? And I'm not saying good or bad, I'm just saying that's very different. Where these guys, each person's got their own little world going on. I don't want to spend this whole thing on Alice Cooper history, although that would be fun. So Alice, I mean, as a band, those guys kept getting kicked out of just about everywhere they went in the early days because it was so weird, nobody would get it, right?
Yeah.
Frank Zappa, and of course there's the Zappa and Alice connection. Frank was so weird, but was cool weird. Alice was so weird that things, and you're right, like the songs didn't really make sense, but what was so cool about a lot of that early stuff too is they would play a song that would be 7 minutes long and it'd just be this crazy, weird, kind of linear thing that isn't coming back to a chorus. Well, they figured out, of course, that there's just no way of becoming super popular doing that. Ezrin comes in and goes, look, we need something that people can connect to, which was...
Right.
You know, that's where the whole thing started. So my point is what's cool about this is when you start listening to songs in a layered sense, you start kind of recognizing that the emphasis doesn't have to always be on the complexity of the guitar part. Now, I'm not saying that it can't be. If that's your thing, I love lots of guitar things going on. I'm just saying the songs that we're listening to, what we're recognizing is that a lot of these songs have other things going on that are supporting the layer. When you first start learning how to write songs, you're not thinking in terms of layer. Oftentimes, you're thinking in terms of chords. What do I need? Do I need a riff? So this one isn't on my list, but if I do this. Again, you know the song. That's the selling point. And then it goes into the verse. Let's see. So the verse is really the riff idea. They're both in A. He's just taking the riff, we could call it riff A, and he's making riff A1 and riff A2. That's what he's doing. He's singing over riff A2 as his verse, and he's singing over riff A1 as his chorus. They give me cat scratch fever. Cat scratch fever. So he's thinking da 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 da, like he comes up with this riff, and now he's got to have a lyric that either is juxtaposed to that rhythm or it's that rhythm, and that's what he chooses. Cat scratch fever. He's literally doing the rhythm of the guitar with the words. The words could have been anything, but he chose Cat Scratch Fever, and that's a conversation in itself, is lyric writing and that kind of thing. When you start learning how to write, the more you start recognizing the power of layering. And it takes a while to get used to, and this is why sometimes it's nice to work with other people, right? Because even though you might be able to write the bass line, you might not write it like a bass player writes a bass line, because you don't think necessarily like a bass player. Now, it's okay, and doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, doesn't mean you shouldn't explore it, but sometimes it's nice to have somebody else. Like, drums are one of the big ones for me, because when I start writing something, the groove of the drum can make all the difference in the world in the way the song sounds. Well, nowadays, what's really nice is if you have software, you can, put a half-time groove and test it out. Put a double-time groove, test it out, see what you think of it. But a lot of times when we come to the table of trying to write songs, we think, well, I need a verse, or I need a chorus, or I need an intro. Well, you don't know when you start writing whether the part you're writing is going to become the intro or become the verse. And it doesn't always have to be complex. What we're learning about Whole Lotta Love, what we're learning about Crazy Train, and certainly what we learned about the one I just played, Cat Scratch Fever, is it isn't overly complex. Now, School's Out is a little more complex. And it's got that orchestral writing. When you get to the no more pencils, again, it becomes really kind of uniquely strange for the time. And that was something that was really unique for them. You get into the 80s, Alice Cooper, and he stopped doing all that, right? His career went down the drain with his, what we call the blackout albums, right? Those albums when he was drugged up and that sort of thing, which I love those albums, but he needed a career. So when he came back out of that, he's making phone calls to everybody who's popular at the time, writing, writers, performers, whatever, like, I need a career again. And that's where Trash came. And of course, that whole thing was his career for the next 10 years, was all of that kind of writing, which is the typical kind of writing. Nothing like what his early writing was like. Anyway, so let's keep going here. So now we've got... Bass doing a great little thing there. Everybody just keeps building. Now we're finally in. But it took 30 seconds. It started with this iconic riff that we all know, which again was, as I'm sure the story was an exercise. Somebody else heard and went, hey, that's really cool. We should make a song out of that. That's where that came from. But you listen to the layering, of that, it starts with that, and that guitar part keeps going, and then all of a sudden we start adding little things here and there. There's, Duff doing his thing on the bass. So we build, hit. So the bass is really doing a melody, isn't it? You can hear a melody in that bass line. And now build, and now we're all in. So now the song just becomes this ebb and flow of loud and quiet. That's what it is. It becomes a pop song after that, right? Of, we want a little less. Which is DCG. Like all these, Sweet Child of Mine, Sweet Home Alabama, right? All that kind of stuff. It's that same Mixolydian chord progression at the end of Hey Jude. Na 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 na. Hey Jude. They're all Mixolydian. That's what they do. Okay? It's emphasizing the 5 chord instead of the 1 chord. That's what makes it sound really still major, but not cheesy major. A different kind of major. That's what Mixolydian. That's what makes Mixolydian so great. So that's what's happening there. And then they all kick in for the... So it changes keys there. We're doing A to C to D. But then the end of the song changes to a completely different thing. They could have just done that, turned it into a pop song, and it would have been done. But then they go into the... yeah, all that kind of stuff at the end, right? Where some people may have already tuned out by then. Some
That's the
people
best
might
part
have
of the
already turned-
song, man.
What's
That's
that?
the best. That's the best part of the song.
Yeah.
There you go. That's exactly the point, right? It becomes a rock and roll jam at the end. But if that makes sense, so that's one of those things where they created this thing and went, well, it's not long enough. We need to do more with it. We're going to let Slash go. So they make a little transition thing that goes from, you know, it does this little thing in there where he's jamming, and then it goes into the E minor part, and they're doing that all the way to the end. But it's essentially a different song at that point. It becomes something completely different. And that most likely probably happened when they were jamming and went, yeah, we need more. We got to do something else. So if you think about it, that song, if we cut the second half off, that song could have existed on its own as a pop song. But because they do the second half and it does all that stuff that Slash does, it's a Guns N' Roses song. So you never know, and like Chris just said, you never know when something else is going to happen, something else that strikes you. Now, that inspiration came from that lyric. And so this is why there's real power in the words that you say and the hooks that you have and the melodies that you use. Because you think about the he's just mirroring those chord changes. He's not, whoa, he's not doing a whoever, right? He's not doing that. He's just da 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 da. You think about the solo, right? There it is. Right? It's just following those chords. Here's a D. C. He's just following those chords around. And that's Slash's nature, is to do something that's very connected to the chords. Chord chasing is really what it is. He's just very much connecting to those chords until it's his time to let loose. And then he's going to do his normal jammy thing. But there's always going to be an element of that in his playing, because that's what he does. Now, if this resonates with you, the next best step is to have a quick, friendly chat with my team. They can answer your questions and see if it's a good fit for you. There's a link in the description to book a time. Thank you so much for watching.